How's it going, everybody? Welcome back into the shop. I've got a very exciting episode lined up. I'm building a 4-foot wide by 12-foot long maple conference table. Now, the base is made out of steel, and my good buddy Cameron Fisher fabricated that base for me. I'll put a link in the description to his Instagram account so you can check out his work. I really appreciate it. That base came out looking great. For this video, this is going to be a two-part series, and so in this first video, we're going to focus on gluing up the maple top. This is hard maple we're working with, and since it's 12 feet long, it's a pretty tricky glue up. So you're going to get to see the process of milling the lumber, joining it, running it through the S4S, and then sanding it, and then the final step of getting that glue joint tuned up and the whole tabletop glued together. It's a great video for those of you who are interested in learning that process, and for those of you who are just interested in seeing how a large tabletop is fabricated. So let's get started. Okay, so it is time to start milling the maple for the Valcor conference table. Now, when I say Valcor, I'm talking about the company I'm making this for. So there's no real special name to that. Just what I call it. So it's in my notes. What's that, Feist? Now, the challenge with this is I have to joint 12-foot links, and I'm doing it on my own. I've been kind of dreading this because it's really not an easy thing to do. Plus, my joiner is only a 58-inch long bed, so it's not even capable of getting a good edge joint on 12 feet. I have a stand I'll put up. I just want to get them close to straight lined. When you're working with big heavy material, these gloves are a lifesaver. They help you get a grip on things, and they save your hands, because I'm 36 and my hands already feel like they're getting arthritis. So these will help me get a grip. I've worn the crap out of these. There's holes. I need a new pair. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Now, what I'm finding to be the most difficult, it's actually going a lot easier than I thought. It's just hard work. It's the start of the cut that's really hard. It's hard not to want to let that board, the back end, drop and not take enough. And then it's hard not to want to lift it and then kind of scoop it out and take too much off the end. So they look fairly straight, which is promising, but those ends are kind of tapering off. So hopefully I can cut those ends off when I cut the length. Okay, so these boards on the floor are the ones I've discarded for various reasons, probably more because there's some twist in them and I don't want to deal with that. One of them has a huge bow in it along the edge. I don't want to deal with that either. So what I need to do is go through what I want to keep and use and just make sure. I want to measure the widths, add it all up, make sure I can hit 48, and then I'll proceed with ripping off the widths. 9 plus 9 plus 5.5 plus 7 plus 8.5 plus 5.5 plus 8.5 equals 53 inches. We're good to go. That gives me 5 inches to work with as I process these down, rip them, straighten them out, and clean up the edges. So that's great. We're good. so let me explain real quick what this machine will do for me. I've got 4 cutter heads in here. 1, 2, 1 in here, 3, and 1 in here, 4. So the first cut takes a cut off the bottom of the board. Second cut takes a cut off this edge of the board. The third cut takes a cut off the opposite edge, which I set my width here. And then the final cutter head takes the thickness of the board down to whatever I set it. It has a nice long table, so this machine will really, not only will it mill everything in one pass, but it also straightens everything pretty nicely. So my hope is the S4S will really make these joints nice and tight. And if it does, then I'm probably gonna defer my original plan of keeping these wide and go ahead and rip them and run those to the S4S, and that way I pretty much have everything jointed through the big machine. Way easier than trying to figure out how to joint these. Okay, so I want to set my thickness. I'm going to take it to 1.812, which is 13/16. And then my first board I'm going to take to 4 1/8, so that's 4.12 on the dial. Right about there. We have a problem. The board's going to run right into that mortiser. So now I get to move the mortiser.
How can we make this look bad in front of
I love that machine. That is such an awesome machine. So glad I have it. There's been so many times where I thought about selling it, and when I use it, I'm like, man, I got to keep this. It's such quick work of milling lumber. Okay, so it's time to start laying out these boards. So since it's maple, it doesn't have a very distinct grain pattern, so I'll try to match things up the best I can, but this is a pretty simple layout. Like I said, I'm going to lay out a 24-inch and a 24-inch, do it in 2 sections, and then we'll glue it up. Okay, so this is what I've got. I've got the 2 sections. They're each about 25 inches. They give me a little extra to work with. I'll use my Festool domino and put dominoes in all along here. And the reason for that is not for strength, but just to help line everything up when I put it together in the clamps, because these boards have a little bit of warp in them, but they're fairly straight from on the edges, which is the key for a good glue up. Okay, welcome back into the shop. When I last left you guys, I had just glued up this top. I've already got the other half of the top in the clamps over here. I did that early this morning. This top now is ready to go through the wide belt sander here. I've loaded it up with an 80 grit belt. I'll start with 80 grit, go to 120, then go to 220, and I'll write down my number I finish at, and then whenever I come and get this one out of the clamps later today, I'll run it through, doing the same thing to the exact same thickness. And then we just got to get those 2 joints straight and make the glass glue up to get the full 48. So I'm just going to set up and do a little bit of time lapse and get you through this real quick. Okay, so I've got both sides sanded. I need to correct myself. I said I was going to 220, but it's actually a 150 grit, that final pass. So what I'm going to do is I've got one side up here on the benches. I'm just spanning both benches. I'm going to bring the other one over, set it up, see how my joints fit. Hopefully there's not a whole lot of tweaking to do, but those joints seem to be really accurate. So let's put them together and kind of see where we're at. Looks like we are going to need some work here. We've got contact at the ends. It looks like we're open on the top a little right there because it's probably hitting on the bottom a little square. The middle gap's a little bit bigger than that gap, which is not a bad thing. You would rather you have a little bit more of a gap in the middle than on the ends. You don't want to be forcing the ends together. So the only way I'm going to be able to joint these boards together is using a router. They're just too heavy to move to my joiner and too heavy to get in the workbench to work with a hand plane. So what we need to do is get a straight edge that runs the full length of this top and use that as a guide and a reference for my router to run against and cut this full thickness in one pass. We'll just take the slightest bit off, maybe an eighth, no more, maybe just a 16th if we can do it. Okay, so I've got this one edge run with the router and I'm really pretty happy. I've got a clamp on it to see how it all turned out. I haven't done this edge, but I don't think I'm going to need to. It really looks good and it's sitting pretty flat. You can see the level down there. There's no bow or kink in this top at all. And I've got a nice spring joint, so I've got about a 16th gap, maybe a heavy 16th gap where the clamp is, and it's tight on the ends. So when I can put a clamp right here, and essentially I could clamp the whole top up that way. I mean, the gap is clean. There's no gap the whole distance except maybe right here, so I probably need some clamps there. But if I pick up on this one side, it doesn't slide at all. That is, the pressure of that clamp on that is holding it. So that's an excellent joint. There's no need to keep messing with this. You can always make things worse by trying to make it better. So at this point I'm going to lay out all my dominoes, cut those in, and then we'll get this thing in the clamps. So for the most part, I'm really happy with how this came out. I've got a nice flat surface all the way across. We've got that one glue joint that we'll clean up with the cabinet scraper and a hand plane. So this will get to sit overnight. Come back first thing in the morning, cut it to length, cut it to width, and then we got a lot of sanding to do with the orbital, and then finish, and then we're gonna deliver this thing. As always, I really appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the build and the process of fabricating this tabletop. I'm excited to bring you guys the next episode here real soon. It's going to be real interesting. We're going to finish up the top, cut an access, a really cool little access for cord management for the conference table. And then the delivery on this was really sketchy and interesting. So you'll get to see the process of using a scissor lift to hoist this table up onto a second story loft. So stay tuned. That video will be here shortly. And as always, thanks for tuning in.